All right. Well, we are back to talk about the mission of God for the family again, which is fantastic. I took a week off because my daughter was getting married, and I was able to, gratefully, I was able to take some time to just focus in on getting the wedding planned and be there to support my wife as she did most of the planning and execution and everything. And was able to actually officiate at my daughter's wedding, which was such a huge blessing. So as we talk about the mission of God for the family, it's been very real for me watching my daughter launch and marry a wonderful young guy and them go out and start discovering what mission God has for them specifically. And we've looked at the way God calls Adam to guard and to garden, and how gardening is more than just the act of physically gardening the earth, that there's a really central part of that is becoming fruitful people, right? And that God, throughout the scriptures, the metaphor of becoming fruitful, of being made of dirt and becoming a fruitful garden, you're living your life in such a way that your life produces fruit like a fruitful garden, that metaphor is used all throughout the Bible to talk about the way that we're supposed to live and what it looks like when we live in a godly way, right? That godliness is fruitfulness. And that word godliness means living like God or living the life of God after him, imitating the life of God. And so that's what we want for our lives personally, but that's what we want for our families. And that's a big part of the mission of God is, for our families, is to live fruitful lives, to raise fruitful children, to have fruitful marriages, fruitful in the sense that they produce new people, but they also produce people that are like Christ, people that love to imitate God. Because if we want to know what God is like, we look at Jesus. And so, um, well, we've been talking before we paused for a week. We've been talking about First Peter 3, verse 8. Finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one for another, love as brothers, be full of pity, be courteous, and this is what we're going to talk about now, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise, bless, knowing that ye are thereunto called, so that you will inherit a blessing. So he's in the middle of talking about what it means or how to be of one mind. And that's what we've been talking about, is how to have your family all on the same mission, the mission that God has called us to together. And when he starts talking about how to be of one mind, how to be on the same mission together, how to agree together, how to have the kind of community where you're all working towards the same goal, he starts talking about having compassion for one another, loving one another the way brothers love one another, having pity towards one another, and being able to understand one another, being courteous towards one another. The Having compassion, I think, is another way to being full of pity, meaning understand why other people feel the way they do, and have an understanding of their of what they love and what they desire and what they're after. And sometimes that is in a way that helps them because they're doing something wrong. Sometimes but oftentimes it's a way of really knowing what drives a person, what kinds of gifts that God has given to a person. Well, the next we come to not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but instead blessing, knowing that you are thereunto, unto blessing called, that you will inherit a blessing. So here we have something that's really amazing, and it is a game changer in a marriage, a game changer in a family, and that's when we get out of the cycle of reciprocating evil for evil, and we get out of the cycle of really of rivalry, where somebody does something to you and you think, well, I've got to get them back. I've got to even the scales because they've done something wrong to me. that they have attacked me, that they have been accused me of something. They've attacked me verbally. They've done something evil to me, and I need to get them back. He said, "Don't do that. If you want to be of one mind, when someone sins against you, said instead of responding in kind, returning evil for evil, instead return a blessing." Now, this is something that's hard to do. It's hard to get out of this cycle. But here we see that this is the way to becoming a family that is working together towards a goal, that is in fellowship. And but notice the way he explains how to do that, because this isn't just something that we kind of grin and bear it, that we become that we become somebody that can be walked all over for Jesus. This is talking about what it looks like to live by faith, because he says, know that you were called unto a blessing, right? That in the future you are going to inherit a blessing. And when somebody sins against us, or when somebody comes after us, they do evil towards us, they rail against us, that he says, what by faith, we can actually reach into the future, into the blessing that we know is coming, and respond in the present according to the blessing that's going to come in the future. So uh, instead of looking at the way a person has treated us and responding in kind, we are to look at the way Jesus has treated us and what he will do for us when he puts all things right, and begin and respond to him, respond to Jesus towards the people in our family, right? So when somebody does evil towards us, we can respond with blessing, because we can look at the way Jesus has blessed us and is going to bless us, and pull from those blessings and respond in kind, that we can see the image of God in the person in front of us and respond to that image, because respond to God towards that image, the image of God in a person. And you can't just say, well, I'm going to do this because I know that I'm supposed to be walked all over for Jesus. What he's saying is, you do this by faith, by saying, I know that God has enough blessing for me coming, that if I'm that right here in this moment, I can return blessing even though I didn't receive it from the person. Right? I can return good even though I received evil, because I'm receiving enough evil. I'm receiving enough good from Christ. And I will receive enough good from Christ in the future, that there is plenty for me to return good, even though I have gotten evil right in this moment. And this is has a really transformative effect in a life, especially in a family where there's a lot of fighting, where there's a lot of rivalry, to really commit to saying, hey, let's become the kind of family that returns blessing. Let's race to being the one who pulls out of the rivalry and responds with a blessing. Let's try and become that family together. Now, you can't muscle your way there, right? You need the power of the Holy Spirit. But the way that we get to that is, as it says in James, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up, right? We start by confessing the sins that we have committed in the past, right? We start by confessing the way that we have entered into the rivalry, because the rivalries always come when we think that there isn't enough to go around, that we have to fight for blessings, we have to fight for the good things. There's not going to be enough to go around, and because we are fighting for the blessings, that we think are limited, we end up um, pushing others down in order to raise ourselves up, because if they get some of that blessing and they get the goodness, then there's not as much left for me. Well, the way out of that rivalry, the way to confession, is to say, Lord, please forgive me for not believing that your blessings are good, not believing that your blessings are enough, not believing that there's enough blessing coming, that I don't need to uh, tear it out of the person in front of me, that I can actually give myself and give blessing and give goodness to the person in front of me, because there's going to be plenty of blessing in the future. That is a show is a the beginning of what it looks like to really transform a family that is in a lot of conflict to a family that isn't in conflict, is becoming people that together look at Christ and respond to the way Jesus has blessed us towards one another. Now, we have talked about this a little bit before, but one of the ways that we get away from this is when there isn't really actual deep forgiveness for sin, right? When somebody sins against us and we aren't able to really forgive them, then what's going to happen is then they're going to protect themselves by not humbling themselves, if they know, if I admit to this sin, it's going to be used against me, right? If when you admit to a sin, then that becomes leverage that the person will use against you. You won't ever admit to your sins, and you won't have a way out, or people won't have a way out of the rivalry with you if you aren't a forgiving person. So it's more than just learning to bless. It's also learning to be a tenderhearted and forgiving person, so that when people do confess their sins, you're quick to forgive them, and you forget about it, right? You don't treat them according to that sin anymore. That also depends upon believing that there is enough blessing coming in the future, right? That we can look to, by faith, we can look to God putting all things right, God filling us to overflowing with blessing. And then we can take that future blessing, that future all things put right in, and we can bring it into the present by faith in the way that we treat one another. Right? That is the mindset that Peter here says leads to all being of one mind, right? Is that when somebody strikes up a rivalry, or in the midst of a rivalry, when somebody does something wrong, rails against us, that we eject ourselves from the rivalry by returning blessing, right? By returning with kindness and blessing, um, because we know that God in the future is going to take care of us. So, uh, um, good to be back talking about these things, what the mission of God for the family is. And we will be back again tomorrow. Um, the the talking about the next verse, for he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips that they speak no guile, right? Talking about the way that we build our house with edifying words, or build our family a place to live with the way that we speak to one another. So all right, well, good to be back, and see you again tomorrow.